Hi, I'm Jamie.
And I'm Kabir.
Every week we send the RSPB's Notes on Nature email to many of our supporters. And if you don't get it already, I'll tell you how to sign up a little bit later. But over the past couple of months, we've also tried a new thing, a weekly TV show called Notes on Nature TV.
Today we're bringing you a special live edition of Notes on Nature TV. And coming up in the next hour, Deborah Meaden chats about some of your favourite garden bird photos.
And Simon Mayo tells us about some of his favourite birds, one of which may surprise you because it's not really big garden bird watching.
And there are wildlife gardening tips from author Bridget Strawbridge Howard.
And we'll be introducing you to 6 birds you probably won't, unless you're really, really lucky, be seeing in your big garden birdwatch this weekend.
Now today is the final day of this year's Big Garden Birdwatch, and we hope you're able to take part if you haven't already. But if you haven't, here's how.
So Big Garden Birdwatch really is simple. So what do you need? Essentially, all you really need is a window to look out of your eyes, a pair of binoculars if you have them, a notebook and a pen, of course, to write down what you see. Maybe a bird, but not essential. And of course, you need, a cup of coffee. So you also need 1 hour, and that's very important. So this is an actual study. This is a bit of citizen science that loads of you will be taking part in over the weekend. So it's important that we keep everybody's survey consistent. So it's 1 hour only. So in that hour, what are you recording? Well, it's the number of species that you see. You need to keep a tally of all the species that you see during your hour. But what you also need to record is the highest number that you see at one time. So I must stress that. So this isn't a case of adding up all the different tallies that you see. So if we use goldfinch as a good example, because they often turn up in flocks. So if you get a flock of 10 goldfinch turn up, write down the number 10. If 5 minutes later you get another 5 goldfinches, for instance, you don't add those two together, so the number does not become 15. However, maybe half an hour after you've seen that flock of 10, a flock of 12 turn up. Suddenly the number that you write down alongside goldfinch is number 12. So hopefully that clears that one up for you. So another really important thing to remember is that it's birds that land in your garden or in the area that you're watching. So it's birds that land there, so this does not include things that fly over, which is a little bit sad as I get things like buzzards flying over here. But in my case here, I'm watching my feeders and the area around my feeders, and that's my kind of survey zone. So that's very important to remember. So once you've spent your hour recording everything that lands in your garden or area that you can see, and you've written down all the species, the most important thing is that you submit your results. Without your results, we can't use that information to find out, how our garden birds are faring. This survey's been going on an awful long time, over 4 decades, and it's telling us some really important information about how some garden birds are declining and some are increasing. And of course, that information informs some very important decisions around conservation of our beloved garden birds. So very important you submit your results. Sorry, getting a bit distracted there. So how do you submit your results? It's really simple. Just head to our website, rsbb.org.uk/birdwatch, or if you have one, we've got these leaflets floating around all over the place, and you may well have also got your pack in the post, and that will explain how to submit your garden birdwatch results. But hope you have a lot of fun. That is a big part of this as well. This is one of the funnest things you can do, and of course, one of the simplest. So good luck.
Well, what I love about doing the Big Garden Birdwatch every year is that, as Luke has just spelled out to us, it is so easy. You just sit, relax by your window, write down the bird you see, send the details into the RSPB, and you're contributing to this really, really important citizen science project. Kabir, have you done your Big Garden Birdwatch already?
Yes, I have, Jamie. In fact, we've seen the usual starlings and parakeets, which I'll talk to you a little bit about later. But the real highlight was a pair of blackcaps. Now, I think these particular blackcaps migrate from northeastern Europe. And I say that because they only appear in the garden at this time of year, in winter. We don't have many berry bushes either, but we do have some surrounding the house in neighbouring gardens as well. And we do get a few redwings. We haven't got any this big garden birdwatch, but we do get the occasional fieldfare sometimes, and they're always really great to see. And we get goldfinch and greenfinch flocks in the spring feeding from the sunflower hearts. They love sunflower hearts, don't they, Jamie?
They really do, because they haven't got the hassle of having to take the shell off to get to the tasty bit inside. I'm just going to ask you about those blackcaps though. What do you think drew them into your garden? What were they eating?
They were surprisingly eating, I think, actually, I don't know what they eat, but they were eating from the ground feeder, and that's where a lot of starlings usually eat, and less of them have come to the ground feeder. So it's allowed the smaller birds to have their meal there, such as robins and blue tits and great tits. And unusually, we've got some blackcaps, and that started last year, this particular pair coming in. I think it's the same pair, but I could be wrong.
Now, if you just move slightly, we can see the ground feeder behind you, can't we? So I think it's just behind your shoulder. Yes. So
yes,
very close. So you never know. Something might turn up while we're on, hopefully. So I've done my big garden birdwatch as well, and we had a surprise visitor too. So the garden that you can see behind me, this is on a new build estate. So when we got here, it was a bit of a blank canvas. There wasn't anything here. It was just 12 by 14 meters of clay, actually, which is fun to garden in, I can tell you. So we're gradually building up more and more bushes and things. And as we add more to the garden, more vegetation, the birds get a bit more confident. And today in our big garden birdwatch, we actually had a blue tit, which we hardly ever see here. Now, I bet you get blue tits already, don't you? You've got lots of bushes and trees.
Yeah, we do, Jamie. We've even got some specialized blue tit feeders. I don't think you can see them, but they're hanging on the bushes behind me just here. And they absolutely love them. And the great tits do as well. And we've even got one in the shape of a robin. And the robins like those as well. I don't know if they can recognize themselves, but there we go.
Maybe they can. Maybe there is something there. So let's have a look at our live cams now, because we've got cameras set up all over the place looking at some amazing bird feeders.
Wow.
Which one should we go to first? What do you think?
I think we could go to the top left at RSBP Saltholm in County Durham.
Yes, let's have a look at Saltholm, because there were some lovely goldfinches on there earlier. I can't see anything now. Has it gone a bit quiet? Can you see anything?
Did you say there were tree sparrows here yesterday?
Yeah, there's been all sorts, and actually on the ground under this particular feeder, which is on our live stream, you can often see things like moorhens scuttling around underneath, picking up the spilt food, and the odd mallard duck. Let's try Arn, because Arn has been quite busy this morning as well, and I think we've had quite a few different species on there. And this is now, oh, there is something going on at Arn. So there's a blue tit on the left,
blackbird on the ground feeder.
Yep. So what you can see on that feeder is there is a block of fat in the middle, and that's I've been watching this for a few days now, and it shrinks throughout the day, doesn't it? Because the birds absolutely love that. And if you're very lucky, you might get to see a woodpecker on here. There's a goldfinch.
Just now there was a coal tit on the centre feeder by the suet cake. You can identify coal tits because they're quite small compared to most species in the tit family. And most of all, they have that white stripe running down the head, don't they, Jamie?
They do. I'm just looking at that one on the left. Is that a nuthatch there?
Yes, I think it is.
Oh, well, that's great. Nuthatch live on air. That is one of my favourite birds.
I've only ever had one in the garden. They're great birds.
I wish. I think. Oh, siskin. Yep. Oh, we're getting all the hits this morning, aren't we? On this feeder. This feeder is a really good one to watch. And nuthatch and siskin, I think, have to be two of the highlights that visit this one. So yeah, I don't get nuthatches in the garden here. I think you need some really nice big trees around you for that, don't you?
I remember I was doing my homework. This was back in June and July, and I was just doing my homework, and in the corner of my eye and my peripheral vision, there's quite a large tree trunk that was growing out of the patio. And there was this one bird just flitting about, and it was climbing upside down on the tree trunk. And I thought, no, can it really be? And I looked, it was a nuthatch, the first of the garden.
Amazing thing to see. What a garden tick that is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think people are seeing a lot of birds at the moment, and I have to say that if you are sending in your results to us, please do. However many birds or how few birds you see, do bear with us, because as you can imagine, a lot of people are very, very, very keen to get the results into us this morning. So if the website's not working straight away, do try it again a little bit later, but do persist, because that information is really, really important to us. Now, I think there's a couple of other live cams. What have we got left? Shall we go to Loch Garten? Because that particular live cam at Abernethy Loch Garden Reserve. I was going to say, because you were talking about coal tits earlier, and you can see there's that white stripe down the back of the head that's really distinctive. Always hoping for
the feeder behind.
Oh, that's a bit distant. I'm always hoping for a crested tit. Oh, yes.
All coal tits.
Yeah, the coal tits everywhere. And sometimes you do get a red squirrel on that one. So we'll come back to that a bit later. Oh, look at those coal tits. They are amazing. Coal tits don't ever stay very long on a bird feeder. They will take away a peanut or a seed, and then we'll go and cache it somewhere. They'll hide it. They'll have a little larder, won't they?
Oh, look, there's a red squirrel. Red squirrel.
Excellent. Red squirrel alert. So we have had red squirrel, we've had nuthatch, we've had siskin, we've had coal tit. We're doing really, really well this morning.
Yeah, we're doing very well.
This is excellent. One final. Oh yes, we're going to go. Should we go to Black Isle? Have a look at that one. There's some good ones there. Oh yes. Oh, it's going to be a little bit. Coal tit. It's the same coal tit. I'm sure it's following us around. Dunnock, going along the bottom, looking a bit scared of the robin, and a blackbird. Yeah. Okay, we'll come back to some of these later. There's the greenfinch on the left. Nice greenfinch, a nice bit of yellow on the wing. We'll come back to some of these in a little bit, because there's a lot of other things that we're going to show you and tell you this morning. Some brilliant stuff coming up. So, Kabir, first of all, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the amazing stuff that you do for promoting wildlife and birds in towns and cities. And you're a real champion of the nature that you can find in urban areas. In fact, a couple of years ago, you made that amazing interactive map of London, which I'm hoping we can show you today. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I created it 2 years ago, and my aim was to create a picture of all the nature reserves and designated wildlife sites you find in the capital, just to show how biodiverse it is. And there are over 1,300 publicly accessible wildlife sites in the capital, and they are everywhere. I mean, there are at least 5 within a kilometre of my house, so there are lots of them. And I live in the northwest corner of that map. But yes, I was very pleased with the reception it got initially, and when people tell me about the map, I always feel really happy, because they're using it as a tool for exploration. They're viewing the capital in a completely different way, and I find that amazing, how people are now looking at London in a different way. And I think, Jamie, that has happened a lot, especially in our towns and cities during these lockdowns, how people have started to connect with nature more.
Absolutely. And what you've shown us with the map there of one particular city is that there's a lot there already. There are street trees, there are parks, there are small nature reserves, or nature reserves of all manner of sizes in and around London. But this is a direction we want to go in everywhere, isn't it, really? The sort of greening the urban areas.
Yes, of course. And with urban greening, I'll take London as an example here. It's taking place within inner London, within the City of London and the City of Westminster, and other parts of inner London too. It consists of all of these green walls and green roofs, and they create a network, if you'd like to call it that, of sort of corridors for wildlife to travel, for pollinators, so bees and butterflies, to travel on to different green spaces in central London. And also one bird especially might benefit from them, which is the black redstart. And now these birds established themselves in London during the post-war era, when there was a lot of rubble, and the rubble imitated their natural rocky habitat. And unfortunately, they've declined quite a bit since then. But I'm very hopeful that these green corridors of this urban greening scheme with green walls and green roofs will help them to bounce back and increase their population. So I hope that will also benefit people in the city as well. So city dwellers can hopefully appreciate their urban wildlife even more.
Now, there's one particular species of urban wildlife that I know you're fascinated by, and a little bit like the black red star, it's been attracted to cities by, I suppose, the buildings that almost mimic its habitat a little bit, its natural habitat. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it? Because I think we've got a little film as well, haven't we?
The peregrine falcon. Okay, so the peregrines, they are the fastest bird in the world, and it's remarkable that we have them here in the UK, and they appear quite large and bulky among UK falcons. But the reason, as you're saying, Jamie, why they've done so well, one of the reasons why they've done so well in urban areas is because of the concrete high-rise towers and the skyscrapers in central London and in other cities in the UK. They imitate their natural cliffside habitat where they were once abundant. But it's come to the point where they've done so well that London has the second highest density of breeding peregrines in the world.
In the world?
Yeah, by New York City. And another reason why they've done so well is that when they look on the ground from wherever they're perched, that's their dinner plate. There are pigeons everywhere, and they are arguably the bird that has adapted the best to urban areas. And of course, pigeons aren't everyone's cup of tea, but peregrines help to control their populations effectively. And that's another reason why they've done so well. But yeah, they're fascinating birds.
Excellent. Let's have a look at this little film, because I think we've got a bit of footage of you having a look for these amazing birds.
Behind me is the chimney of the Tate Modern. This unusually is probably my favourite place in the whole of London to see peregrine falcons. They can be... There's one. They can be found across the city of London and sometimes perch, as you've just seen, up on the chimney itself. What I love about the city of London is that it's this huge conurbation of buildings from lots of different time periods, and it really stands out. It's really, really special. Take a look.
Oh, that was lovely. Really nice clear day there as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was back in July or August. And we were at the Tate Modern, and we knew before that that's where the peregrines nest quite frequently. I think almost every year on top of the Tate Modern chimney, which is a former power station. And they nest on the chimney every year, I think, and they fly back and forth between the City of London and the Art Gallery. And in better times, please do go and see the peregrines at the Tate Modern. Yes, the artwork is great, but so are the falcons. So please go and see them. But yeah, they're great birds to see, and it's very easy to try and find them in very urban areas like central London.
So how would I tell a peregrine? So if I'm in an urban street and I'm looking up, what's the giveaway? What's the telltale sign that there's a peregrine?
So you'll see a bird that's a lot larger than a pigeon, well, slightly larger than a pigeon, and as I've said before, it's quite large and bulky than most UK falcons. So if you see one flying in the sky, it'll make this quite, I don't know how to describe it, this shrill call, and it's quite repetitive. And it's almost like it'll make that call when it's flying in the sky, and often when it's hunting pigeons, when it's chasing pigeons. And remarkably, I've seen it eating parakeets at the Tate Modern too. But you'll know the telltale sign is hearing that sharp, repetitive screeching and seeing a bird that's slightly larger than a pigeon flying in the sky. But it's quite easy to see them, and I can't 100% guarantee it, but it's quite likely you'll see one if you come to London.
And indeed to any other sort of big cities nowadays.
Yes.
And the great thing about them as well is that not only can you spot them in flight, but they sit around a lot. So they're fairly static. So if you've got a good view, and I remember getting a really good view of one on Norwich Cathedral, they'll basically sit there for ages and ages. And if you've got a binoculars, a telescope, if you're able to and have the patience to sort of stand and look up, you may well see one.
Yes, the RSBP, you're quite right, Jamie, how they just sometimes sit there, and they're sometimes perched there just enjoying their meal that they've just caught.
Yeah.
But sometimes I've noticed the RSPB set up a stand with scopes, especially in the summer when there are a lot of visitors to the South Bank, of course, in better times. But if they're ever there during the summer holidays, please go and see them, because they have scopes, and often they'll point it at the Tate Modern chimney, the side of the chimney. And often you'll see two peregrines. I saw two peregrines, and often you'll see this, just enjoying their meals, and they're just sitting there, and they sit there for hours and hours, just eating away. It's quite funny to watch.
They are fantastic birds, and as we said, easy to see. Let's look next at one of those birds you've just mentioned, the ring-necked parakeet, because this is a bird that's really kind of settled in a lot of urban areas now. Prey for peregrines, definitely. But tell us a little bit about them. What are they doing here? How have they grown in number so successfully?
Well, Jamie, no one really knows how these birds came to be, and many of you will be familiar with these birds if you live in London or the southeast, and they're expanding. Their population is expanding rapidly across the UK. Well, no one knows exactly how they came to be, but there are a few interesting rumours. For example, they escaped from a film set, or Jimi Hendrix released his birds, Adam and Eve, into central London. But I don't think either of those accounted for this huge growth in parakeets. I think the simple answer is quite boring. The birds just escaped from people's aviaries and bird collections in London or the southeast. And the reason why they've done so well is because they're quite hardy birds. They can survive the cold winters, and they're native to parts of Africa and Asia. They can survive quite cold winters, and they don't have many natural predators. So they do well with occupying nests and nests in tree holes especially. But you can see them all across the UK now, well, increasingly across the UK, especially in cities. And they often feed on fruits and seeds, so look for them in orchards as well. There's something that people do, especially in the royal parks in Westminster, especially in places like Kensington Gardens, where you just hold out an apple, and there will be at least 5 parakeets that just come and perch on you.
Goodness. Well, I think basically the answer is that there is no one single source for this population of parakeets. People keep them as pets. They're still popular pets, and many have escaped over time, haven't they? So that's how this is built up. Really interesting birds. I've just spotted over your shoulder. You did have a wood pigeon visit you just now. You have to tell me if anything appears behind me, but yeah, they're just definitely checking out your ground feeder there.
Amy,
so
have you seen any parakeets in your garden?
Not here. Well, in central Bedfordshire, I don't think they've quite reached us, but certainly I know that a lot of the major sort of conurbated areas, they have found plenty of food and warmth. And I remember living in London having a window feeder, one of those ones you stick on your window when I lived in a flat, and we did have a parakeet coming right up to us then. And they are big birds, aren't they? They're impressively large.
They're quite colourful as well. It's always great to see that splash of colour, the rose beak and the green feathers, and especially the way that they fly. My mum and dad were telling me how they especially like that, how in the mornings just waking up to see a parakeet fly onto the feeders is always a joy to see. It just adds a splash of colour to your day.
It really does. Now, one other bird that we're going to talk about, in sort of an urban bird, is the starling. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Well, the starlings, we were just seeing the Saltholm camera, weren't we, Jamie?
Yeah.
Sometimes there are huge murmurations at places like some of our reserves, like Saltholm and Ham Wall in Somerset. And these are large murmurations, thousands of starlings gathering together. No one knows exactly why they do this, but there's a number of theories how they could be communicating with each other or evading predators like a hungry sparrowhawk or a peregrine or something like that. But they've adapted quite well to urban areas because, unfortunately, out in the countryside and in farmland areas, their food sources are declining. But in the city, it's very easy for them to find scraps of food, for example, chips in town centres and city centres. And they're quite brave birds. They're quite tame nowadays. And I've got quite a few of them in my garden. I started off with 54 of them, 54.
Wow.
And they were mainly fledglings at the start of the first lockdown back in March.
Yeah.
And it's great to see them grow and develop in our garden because of the feeders. They love to come here to towns and cities because they've got an abundance of food, and they've really relied on that. And a lot of them have been ringed for conservation purposes as well, by a local ringer. I'm not sure who, I need to find that out, but a lot of them were ringed back in October, and they're almost adults now. So it's quite amazing to see how they've virtually depended entirely on our garden for food, and they live in the surrounding trees and bushes.
It is lovely to, when you get the families of starlings arriving in your garden in summer, and they're brown, and they gradually get their plumage. They graduate from school, from starling school, don't they? And they change their plumage. I've just got a few messages coming in from people who are watching. So Teresa on YouTube has said that she has a black cat visiting our garden, a bit like you did, and it has a yellow face due to it feeding on nectar. How cool is that? And Dawn Wheeler has a black cat in her garden right now at this very minute. We've also got a report from Alistair in Nottingham, who has peregrines on his office block. So people are seeing a lot of these birds now. Now, I think we have a little treat for you. Every week in Notes on Nature, we look at some of the wonderful wildlife photos sent in by our readers and viewers. And this time I've got a special guest to chat to about your garden bird pictures. And that is the wonderful Deborah Meaden. Hello, Deborah. Welcome to Notes on Nature for the RSPB's Big Garden Birdwatch.
Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me.
It's quite all right. Now, we have got a little lineup of stunning garden bird photos that our readers and viewers have sent in. And I thought we'd just have a look through them today, and we'll have a chat about each one. I'm going to go with the blackbird first, but there is this stunning photo of a blackbird. It looks like it's eating some berries there. It's a really striking picture. Do you get many blackbirds down where you are in the southwest?
We've actually got a lot of blackbirds. Do you know, we've actually got a lot of birds now. We stopped cutting our hedges about 5 years ago, and there was a remarkable difference to the amount of bird life. And blackbirds are all over our property, which is lovely, you know, lovely.
And you get the special kind of bonus of them singing as well, don't you? As a reward for providing them with somewhere safe to nest.
Well, they're lovely, and I love it particularly when, you know, I'm never up at dawn, but at dusk they're always really busy at dusk, aren't they? They're always flitting around and making a noise and saying, "I'm going to bed," you know. So no, they're lovely birds.
You've reminded me, actually, there is something called the dusk chorus, which is less strong than the traditional dawn chorus, but you do get birds singing into the evening, and the blackbird is one of those because of those big eyes. They can operate in sort of low light conditions, so that's why they're usually the first to sing in the morning, and probably the last to sing at dusk, unless you're lucky enough to have nightingales popping around in the hedges as well. But that one there, I think, is munching a hawthorn berry. I don't know if you've got any good berry bushes in your hedges, have you?
Well, we have, and because we don't cut the hedges, you know, they're absolutely full of berry. They're beginning to run low now, but yeah, and I love a blackbird because they don't bother chewing, really, do they? They just take a berry and swallow it whole.
They do, and actually that berry crop is so important, and we really do notice when we do Big Garden Birdwatch at the end of January that. And also, if you get like a severe weather event in February, if the berries have run out in the bushes in the countryside, then that's when you really do get a massive influx into gardens. I'm going to go for the other berry-eating bird photo that we've got here, which is a redwing. Now, I'm hoping that you get some of these on your garden, on your hedges as well.
Well, we do. I didn't know we did, because I thought they were a thrush, and it wasn't until I went out with the fantastic Stephen Moss, who said, no, they look really like thrushes. They've just got this red flash. And I thought, we've got redwing. Often we get fieldfare. We get them amongst the flocks of fieldfare. Would that be right? Yeah,
they do travel in mixed flocks. So we get a mixture of redwings coming to the UK. I have seen them during summertime in Iceland, and they're almost like blackbirds. They hop around by your feet. But they also come from Scandinavia. Fieldfares, I think, chiefly Scandinavia. And they are going to be eating the same kind of food, so they'll be munching the berries. But also, if you get a kind of a mild part of the winter, and you've got some playing fields, you've got some fields where the grass is quite short, they will go around and probe for worms and things as well. Another thing that's just occurred to me is if you go out and it's just getting dark, that is when redwings do move around, because at night they do roam a little bit, because they're moving through the countryside, they're looking for new sources of food, and when they fly overhead, there's a really distinctive sound. It's like a seep 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 kind of call.
Oh, okay.
So listen out for that, especially if it's just got dark when you go out. And that's a little nocturnal call that they make to each other to say, "Oh, I'm going this way, follow me," kind of thing.
I will listen out for it.
So that's two birds you've definitely got down there. So lucky to have redwings. I just think they're stunning birds. And we've got one final photo. This is the long-tailed tits. What do you make of this one?
I love a long-tailed tit. They look somehow oriental to me, when they're in the summer, when they're not all fluffed up like this. They've got beautiful, it's like a painting, the lines and the colors on them. But actually this little guy looks like, no, I'm ready for winter. I can puff myself up. You can throw whatever weather you want at me. I can deal with it. It doesn't look all warm and cozy.
It does. It looks almost spherical. If it wasn't for that tail, that's just a little ball, isn't it? I think of them as like little flying lollipops, because it's just, the tail's amazing. And the other thing that I love about long-tailed tits is that you never just get one. You always get, there's always extra. So you might see 2 or 3, and then they'll move through the bushes, and there'll be like another 5 come along, and they really hang out in big sort of family flocks, don't they, in the winter?
They do. We've actually seen less this year. I don't know if that's a general thing, but we've certainly seen less long-tailed. We used to regularly see them. And now it's like, oh, there's a long-tailed tit. Well, there's a few long-tailed tits. So I don't know what's happened to them, but no, we definitely saw less this winter.
That's an interesting one, because I think that a lot of these smaller birds, the goldcrest, the long-tailed tits, the ones that do eat a fair bit of insects in their diet, but are also quite tiny, harsh winters can knock them back a bit. They can affect the populations. And it's only in the last few decades, I think, that the long-tailed tit is featured in the top 10 of the Big Garden Birdwatch results. And last year it was in at number 9. So a good year, a nice mild winter will boost the numbers a little bit. So let's hope that it doesn't get too chilly and those numbers can bounce back where you are.
Let's hope so.
I'm going to ask you one final question since I've got you here, Deborah. What's your favourite garden bird? Have you got a favourite? I mean, we've looked at a few lovely ones today, but have you got a top one that when you go out and you see it, you think that's made my day?
Oh, I love the one I'm with. It's if I was looking at a robin now, I'd say it was a robin. We actually have the murmurations. We have the starlings fly over our house, and I think a starling. People don't like I love starlings. They're beautiful birds. So I like the underdog, and I kind of like I like a starling because people kind of take them for granted. So yeah, I like a starling. But then we've got little owls. A little owl is gorgeous. So no, I love the one I'm with. I could give you 27 favorite birds.
That's brilliant. I think, yeah, I mean, that you picked some good ones there. They're the ones that came to mind first. I think are really, really good choices. Deborah, thank you so much. That's been brilliant. And hopefully we'll talk to you again soon.
Oh, thank you very much. I could talk birds all day of the week.
Oh, it was great spending time with Deborah. She's really good fun. Just while that was playing, there is a grey wagtail running behind me on the garden. You probably won't be able to see it, but it arrived just after I finished doing the Big Garden Birdwatch. Isn't that always the way? But yeah, it's currently behind me. So you never know, out this window here, pointing in the right direction, no, that way, you might actually see it scuttling around behind me. Going back to what Deborah was saying there about the birds that she sees in a fairly rural area in the southwest of England, redwings, blackbirds, long-tailed tits. Do you get many of these where you are, Kabir?
Yes, I do. Sometimes there's the occasional, well, sometimes there is the long-tailed tit flock, but they usually appear in the front garden and not the back garden here. But yes, we do get a lot of robins and blue tits and grey tits. So even in a suburban area, even in a city, in your garden, from your balcony, you can see all of these birds because they've adapted very well to urban life. So no matter where you are, you can look out for these birds. But most importantly, even if you don't see anything during your Big Garden Birdwatch, that's also just as important.
It really is. And talking about what people are seeing, we've had quite a few messages coming in. So Heather Clark and Anne Aitken have seen redwings. Probably right now, they've been feeding on apples that Anne's put out. We've got a couple of questions as well. So one for you, Kabir. Terry Dawson says we've got a flock of 27 starlings, which are made up of, I think, quite a lot of them are the fledglings that they grew up over the summer in the garden. Some of the birds have got darker beaks, which they assume are the young birds, and then they've got some with yellowy beaks. Is this the youngsters' beaks changing colour?
I think so, because when we had our fledglings, our 54 fledglings, they were all, as they aged, their beaks became more sorry, more yellow, and that was a sign, I think, that they were growing, because now they are almost adults. They almost look like adults, yes, so I think it is the beaks changing colour. They're aging. They're becoming adults.
They do, and when they're in breeding plumage, you'll notice there's a little bit of colour at the base of the bill, and on the female it's pink, and on the male it is blue. Fascinating starling facts. You've got to see them quite close up for that, obviously. So we've got a few other things we were going to talk about here, but let's have a quick look at social media messages. What else have we got here? There's a question about robins, which has puzzled me. Now, I don't know if we're going to get the answer straight away to this, Kabir. Are there different types of robin, says Jane Port. The one I saw had white around the red, but on our website, there's one that's totally red and all over its head. I suspect that robins probably molt at the end of the breeding season and then get their more power, brighter colours back. What do you think?
I'm thinking that as well. I don't think there are different types of robins. They belong to the chat family, which is robins and redstarts. So we do have redstarts in the UK, but it doesn't sound like redstarts. Sounds like robins molting, as you're saying, Jamie.
Yeah, so a bit of variety there. And robins, of course, are the birds that will sing all the way through winter. So if you've heard a bird singing over the last few months, it's probably going to be a robin. Lovely, sweet little tune that they sing. Now it's time for something totally different. We're going to tell you a bit about 6 birds that you won't see in your garden. And the first one is, I suppose, a little bit similar to perhaps the collared dove or the wood pigeon that you do see, and that is the turtle dove. Now, we've got some fun facts, and Kabir, you're going to introduce us with a fun fact about turtle doves.
So the fun fact is that, yes, they're a member of the pigeon or dove family, but they're the only one of that family in the whole of Europe to migrate all the way from West Africa to the UK. So that's like going from Land's End to John O'Groats 5 times, and that's 3,000 miles, and they do that twice a year. Isn't that fascinating that a bird the size of a pigeon can travel that far?
Indeed, and actually they're smaller than the collared doves that we see in our gardens. So a turtle dove is almost as small as a blackbird. These are tiny little things.
Yeah,
and at the moment they're in Africa, as you say, and they'll be back in spring. But the sad news is that for every 100 turtle doves that we had here in the UK in 1970, there are only about 2. So they've really seriously declined.
But they'll be back in spring, and it's but when they are back in spring, there is a project that the RSBP is involved in, and that's called OperationTurtleDove.org. And it's a collaboration with Natural England, with the Pensthorpe Conservation Trust, and we work with farmers within the UK to help boost numbers of turtle doves here in the country.
Exactly, and the issue that turtle doves face at the moment is that when they return from Africa and they're absolutely very hungry and they need to build up their energy to lay eggs and raise their chicks, there isn't the seed food that they need to eat. So things like vetches, fumitory, knapweeds, those kind of things that you would find in a rural landscape. But because of the way that we grow our food slightly differently now, we don't have those at the moment in the quantities that they need. So Operation Turtle Dove, as you say, Kabir, is working with farmers to help bring them back. And at the moment, you'll only really see turtle doves in the east and southeast and a few other tiny little pockets of the UK. Have you ever seen one?
I've never seen one in the UK, but I did see one in Vienna, in Austria, in a very big park, amongst lots of feral pigeons. And I'm pretty sure, oh, I thought that's a bird on the roof. No, it's not. I'm
feral
pretty
pigeon,
sure
probably.
Yeah, it could be a wood pigeon, but I'm pretty sure that was what I saw was a turtle dove. But I think they like to perch on people's fences and on fence posts. So maybe there is a small chance, as you're saying, Jamie, for those who live in the southwest and in East Anglia, there is a small chance they will come into your garden. I was sent in a photo by someone who lives in Leicestershire, and there was what seemed to be much like a juvenile turtle dove perched on their fence. So anything can happen. It's possible.
It's highly possible, not in winter, but it's highly possible. And some people are very lucky in the east and southeast, Kent, Sussex, East Anglia, to actually get these visiting their garden. Now, second bird, I would be amazed if this turned up in someone's garden. This is the crane. This is a gigantic bird, isn't it? What's the fun fact we've got about cranes?
So whilst many of us put out food such as seeds in our gardens to feed the birds, some of our nature reserves actually put out potatoes for the cranes. They're packed with carbohydrates and they're big and easy for cranes to see. And they love the potatoes.
They really do. So I don't know if they're fond of fish and chips. Maybe they like fish and chips. Cranes are sometimes confused with grey herons, and actually we often get sent photos of grey heron. Maybe if it's landed on the roof or something, people saying, "Oh, I've got a crane in my house." They are similar. They've got long legs, they've got a long neck, they've got long tail feathers as well. But as you can see here, they do look slightly different. But we did lose most of them from the UK, didn't we? Why was that?
Well, I think it's due to loss of habitat mainly, because a long time ago the wetlands habitats were lost, and a long time ago they were also being hunted for food, and the small population had re-established itself in Norfolk originally. And with a helping hand from the RSPB and other conservation groups, they have a brighter future. And in fact, JB, I think, sorry, I've got a bit of a cold today. So yeah, so if you see me keep drinking water, that's just because I have a cold. But yes, I think there was a book I read, Jamie, by Bill Oddie. I think it was by Bill Oddie. He was talking about his friend who worked at the RSPB, and the friend was trying to, via a phone call, help someone identify a bird in their garden. Oh, there's a wood pigeon. They tried to help them identify a bird in their garden. And the person who he was talking to described the bird as reaching over the bird table, that it was taller than the bird table. So it was reaching to get the seeds beneath it. And then he came to the conclusion that it was a crane. So it is possible, but it's very unlikely. But if you do live in places like the Somerset Levels or in East Anglia, they might very well be flying over your garden at some point.
Okay, so I think bird number 3 is even less likely, but I'm happy to be proved wrong. So this is the wandering albatross. Tell us a bit about those.
Well, the wandering albatross, they are huge. They're true seabirds. They are massive. They have the largest wingspan of any bird, which reaches 3.5 meters. And that's quite hard to imagine at first. But if you pick a point on the floor and take 3 half big steps forward, that's the size of their wingspan. It's enormous. Albatrosses, I don't think they're UK birds, but they're kind of. The RSPB is one of Europe's largest conservation organisations, and our work stretches even further than that. In the South Atlantic, we have a few islands known as UK Overseas Territories. These are former colonies, but they're still administered by the United Kingdom. And Tristan da Cunha, which I think is one of the remotest inhabited place on Earth. It and its neighbouring UK Overseas Territories all have breeding wandering albatross populations. So they kind of are a breeding bird in the UK. And that's
could say that. You could say that, but they are in serious trouble. And one of the main causes of decline for most albatross species is what we call bycatch. Albatrosses like fish, they like squid, but that is unfortunately what many fishing boats around the world, particularly, I mean, we're talking about the southern hemisphere really, aren't we, of the planet, use as baits. Specifically, fishing boats called longliners or longline trawlers. And they have fishing lines that run back for miles and miles and miles with all these little baited hooks on. And the albatrosses just think, oh, there's some easy food I can just get just on the surface of the water, dive down, and they get caught. And currently, one albatross is calculated that one albatross gets caught on these things every 5 minutes. So we are working to try and turn this situation around, aren't we?
I think we are, Jamie, because the Albatross Task Force is a really cool sounding name, isn't it? It's a collaboration between the RSPB and BirdLife International, which is a global partner for conservation. And together we work across the world in countries like Brazil, Argentina, Namibia, South Africa, and Japan, to team up with partners, fisheries, and local communities to educate them about the plight of the wandering albatross and help stop their decline.
And indeed, and there are some really simple solutions to things like this. So there are special devices like hook pods that fix onto your baited hook and they help sink it out of the reach of the albatross. There are streams of ribbons that you can fly off the back of your fishing boat, a bit like a scarecrow out at sea that keeps the albatrosses away. So there are really simple solutions out there, and things are starting to turn around. We had some really good news recently about success in Namibia. So you can read all about that on our website. I'm going to say they're not going to turn up in the garden. So just move on to the next one.
There are black-browed albatrosses, though. They do sometimes venture out from the sea into the UK, but that is very occasional. But they're not the size of wandering albatrosses. They're comparatively massive.
But yeah, an unlikely garden visitor. The next one is the avocet, which is the RSPB's logo. What's the fun fact about the avocet?
Well, yes, Jamie, it's our logo. But if the water is murky, if there's poor visibility in the water, avocets can actually feed by touch. And this is where their slender, up-curved bill comes in handy. With a slightly open bill, they sweep from left to right in the water, trying to locate little invertebrates like crustaceans or worms hidden below. And when they touch something, they snap their bill closed.
Amazing, gorgeous birds. As I say, they're on our logo, and also a big conservation success story. These were once lost from the UK, again due to, we talked about cranes being affected by the loss of wetlands and marshes. That was caused by drainage of land, also hunting. But in the 1940s, they did come back because coastal marshes at the time in the east of the country were flooded to prevent invasion during the war. But they became very closely associated with our flagship nature reserve on the Suffolk coast, Minsmere. And I remember in the 1980s making a pilgrimage up there from Kent to go and see these birds, because that is the only place you could go and see these gorgeous, gorgeous birds. Have you ever seen them?
I've seen them at RSPB Titchwell on the Norfolk coast, but they do occasionally turn up at the London Wetland Centre, which is about a 30-minute train ride away from me in Richmond upon Thames and Barnes, and it's amazing to see them here in London. The London Wetland Centre were former reservoirs, and now they've been engineered to become they've been engineered into a wetland nature reserve to attract all sorts of water birds, and including the avocet, and it's great to see them there.
Yeah, so you could almost count the avocet as an urban bird, and that's our good friends at WWT, the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust, who run that particular site. I mentioned Minsmere earlier. So Minsmere is currently, it is, as I say, it's a really famous nature reserve on the Suffolk coast. It's currently threatened by the development of a nuclear power station on its doorstep. And we are running a campaign at the moment to try and, well, make sure that the risks that are being posed to the nature of Minsmere, including the avocets and many, many other species, are considered. So go to our loveminsmere.org website and you can read all about it, and you can sign our petition. We've got two more unusual, unexpected garden visitors for you today. The chough is the next one, and I know these do visit gardens, don't they? But we've got a special fun fact about them to begin with.
All right, so King Arthur was said in some legends to have been turned into a chough, and for some peculiar reason they were believed until the 18th century to deliberately start fire, and their scientific name is Pyocorax, referring to this very myth. And in fact, Jamie, I went to Untersberg, which is a mountain that straddles the Austrian-German border. I went there in 2014 or 2015. And we were going there by cable car. And later on, a few years after that, I read about a myth similar to the King Arthur one, which involves not the red-billed choughs, but the alpine choughs that live on Untersberg Mountain.
And those have got a yellow bill, haven't they? Yellow beak.
Yeah, they've got a yellow bill. And it is said that Charlemagne and his army are buried underneath Untersberg. And if every few centuries, they come out of the mountain to count the number of alpine choughs, the ones with the yellow bills,
as you do,
out in the sky. And in a way, they're doing their big garden bird watch, but every few hundred years. But if
I
you
love
see,
that idea that Charlemagne emerges every few hundred years to do the big garden birdwatch. And of course, there are links with Arthurian legend and Charlemagne legend, and birds like choughs, fascinating stuff. I should just say that we're showing you a sort of a random looking bird that you might not have encountered before. So this is a member of the crow family, and it's related to some of the crows that you might see in your garden: the magpies, the carrion crows, the jackdaws. Except this one is sort of slimmer, down curved red bill, and we tend to see them around the coast, don't we?
yes, do you see any? Have you seen any in your? Sorry, have you seen any in your garden, or indeed at all in the UK?
I haven't seen any in the garden, but I know that we have them on our South Stack Nature Reserve in Wales, Anglesey, and they do turn up in the Warden's Garden. But I suppose the Warden's Garden is on the Nature Reserve, and they use that thin, narrow bill to probe into the ground, to probe into sort of cattle manure to get the grubs and the beetles out. And again, they have declined in the UK, but we are working to help bring them back. We're working with landowners in particular to get the right level of grazing, because they'll need quite short grass so that they can stick those beaks into the ground and get the food. Final bird that you might not get in your garden is the bearded tit. Are they like the blue tits and great tits in your garden? Well, not quite. What's the fun fact we've got about bearded tits?
Well, they're neither bearded nor tits. Also, they eat grit. They eat grit. They need grit in their gizzards in order to break down seeds in the winter. So can sometimes be seen eating gravel on the paths, and also in some nature reserves like RSBP Leighton Moss. The wardens actually put out grit trays specifically for them. They're wetland birds that live in reed beds, so we help them by creating and managing these areas. And Jamie, I love to go to Rainham Marshes, especially to go and see these birds. And you stand on a specific bridge over a stream, and underneath, you won't necessarily see them. You have to be very patient, but you can hear, you know that they're there, because you can hear the youngsters singing, making a very sharp pinging call. And you know that if you're standing on that bridge and you hear that, you know that you're near a bearded tit, and there's a good chance that you might be able to see one.
They're beautiful, beautiful birds, and I thoroughly recommend, when restrictions allow and we can get out and about again, go to a reed bed, go to your nearest wetland, look out for these stunning birds. And as we were saying, this is a bird that lives in reed beds, so we are helping them by creating those reed bed habitats to make sure they've got plenty of places to live. And all of these birds that we've talked about today, all these 6 birds, we can do all this amazing work around the world, not just in the UK, around the world, as we say, with albatrosses, thanks to the support of our RSPB members. And we really, really are grateful for those of you who support us and help us get all this vital conservation work going. Now, back to our gardens. So we've taken you on a trip around the country, around the world, but back to our gardens. Scala radio presenter Simon Mayo is a really big bird fan. So I asked him what he's looking forward to about this year's Big Garden Birdwatch. Simon, welcome. Yes. Hello. What are your favourite garden birds?
I'm not sure that the birds that I'm going to say are going to count as garden birds, because in fact I know they don't, and they're not here yet. But all the time that I spend out in the garden, enjoying the time there. I have a tiny garden, you know, it's like this big. What all it makes me do is make me yearn for the time when the swifts are back. So that's what they all make me think, because the swifts and then the swallows, they just are birds that are, they have a very unusual cry, but every time they appear, they make me feel very joyful. So my most boring answer would be blackbird, because I love the fact that they're so common, and yet they have the greatest song of all. I mean, I know there are other songbirds that can probably be more show-offy, but I love the blackbird probably more than any other. But it just all of the time I'm spending out there, I'm waiting for the swifts, and maybe I'll look up and see if I want to sneak down slightly earlier, though it seems a long way off at the moment.
It does, and actually that's a brilliant answer, because you've given 2 there, one which we can look forward to seeing right now, and one that we can plan and hope for in the future. And obviously now is a cracking time for people to get up their Swift's nest boxes as well.
Yes, I've got one. I have one up there, and it's been studiously ignored by all swifts every single year. But I'm hopeful that this year maybe.
The trick supposedly is to play the sound of a swift, but I don't know how easy that is to do, but you can have a recording that blasts out the screaming. So I know some people sort of poise themselves by their window when they see a swift flying over, they press a button and desperately try and call it down. But fingers crossed, this will be the year.
I don't think I'll be doing that, but I have heard that works.
And what are you most looking forward to about this year's Big Garden Birdwatch?
Well, I subscribe to the Simon Barnes theory here. Simon, who's a great sports writer, but a great lover of nature and a great birder as well. And he wrote, I think it was on the front cover of his book, How to Be a Bad Birdwatcher. And I think he wrote, I think it just says at the bottom, the strapline is "to the greater glory of life," or something like that, words to that effect. And I think that's what I think that's what they're there for. It's just the fact that they're there. If I don't know which bird they are, it kind of annoys me, but also it doesn't matter, because just sitting there, wrapped up very well, is a joyful thing. There are very few things that we're allowed to do that bring us joy at the moment. So this is something to look forward to, because I think you can just sit quietly, study, watch, learn, be happy. That's it.
Wow, that was great. So Simon won't be seeing any swifts just yet, but he probably will be seeing and hearing plenty of blackbirds pretty soon. Now, we've had lots of questions coming in from you, so let's have a look at a few of them. The first one is about redwings, because we've been talking about redwings with Deborah Meaden earlier, and the ones that Kabir and I have seen. So Claire Catherine Morris says, we have redwings at the beginning of January, but they seem to have gone. Have they gone back home? I don't think they will have done yet, will they, Kabir? I think they're going to be around for a little while yet. Normally, I've seen them sort of up until March time. What's the latest you've seen one?
The latest I've seen them is, I think, the same as you, Jamie, around March, mid-March, I think, for me. But interestingly, my local tube station, it has lots of berry bushes, and it's my favourite place in the whole of the local area to go and see the redwings in winter. And there are at least 15 to 20 of them at the best of times, all together, feeding from the bushes. But interestingly, they've been coming later and later each year. So they only arrived back in January, which I found a bit strange. I don't know why that is, but maybe there's a part of the population that's favoured a different area, but I'm not too sure.
It's possible. And I think we do get two groups of redwings coming over. We get some from Iceland and some from Scandinavia, so they may favour different areas. And also you'll notice that when it's particularly mild, you'll get them out on playing fields, pecking up, getting worms out of the grass, as well as feasting on the berries. Go on.
I've seen loads of them in playing fields, and they often feed with starlings, don't they, Jamie?
They do, big sort of mixed flocks, and also mixed in with field birds too, to get those mixed flocks. We've got a message from Sally, who says, I didn't think my 4-year-old would engage in this, but she absolutely loved it. I gave her some binoculars and she got really excited when she saw a bird fly over. So that's brilliant. Well done, Sally. Get everyone keen and started when they're young. Beverly Mobb says, can anyone tell me why the male blackbirds chase away the females from the feeder? What do you think about that one? Why would males chase the females away from the feeder?
I think it's to show off their territorial dominance. They're saying, oh, this is my feeder, stay away from my feeder. So it'll chase any incoming birds, maybe not just the females, but maybe the smaller birds as well, like the blue tits and the robins. It's just sort of advertising and making other birds aware of its presence.
Absolutely. Female blackbirds will do the same, won't they?
Yes.
Yeah, so they're quite pushy birds. Question from Fiona Arnold. We live in the East Midlands, so why do we get seagulls? What do you think of that one?
Gulls, as they're properly known, are a large family of birds. They are, as you say, by the sea most of the time. But if they're in the East Midlands, that's mainly because if you're living near a rubbish, relatively near a rubbish tip, or some place like that, where there's a large food source, you'll get a lot of gulls there. So I get gulls flying over here all the time, and that's probably because of the abundant food source over here. Where they are by the sea, they may not always find it easy to find food, but if they come here, they'll find it a lot easier, and that's why they do so well in urban areas and indeed wherever there are rubbish tips.
Very true. And black-headed gulls often don't go near the sea at all. So these are the birds that in summer have a kind of a chocolate brown head, but in the winter, if you see them close up, and I don't know if these are the ones that you're seeing, Fiona, they have a black spot just behind the eye, so you can identify those as black-headed gulls. Herring gulls too will come inland, lesser black-backed gulls, and as you say, rubbish tips really draw them in. You'll see them on fields as well. As fields are being ploughed, they're following the tractors to get the worms as they're dug up. So these are birds that are adapting to live around us. A couple more quick ones. One from Deborah Barnes, who says, I've put feeders out for the first time this year. Haven't seen any birds at all. So is there anything she can do to encourage birds? Now, I would say, Kabir, that it takes time for birds to get used to feeders, doesn't it?
Yes. So I was talking to a few people about this a few weeks ago, how they had recently put out bird feeders, but they hadn't got any birds. I think it takes time, as you're saying, Jamie, for the birds to firstly notice it and then recognize that it is food, it's for them. And then when they know that there's stuff like seeds and sunflower hearts in the feeders, they'll come in their flocks to the feeders. So let's hope that that happens soon, and you'll hopefully be getting lots of tits, finches and robins to your feeder.
Yes, good luck, Deborah. Give it time is our advice. And finally, Christy on YouTube says, has anyone got any clever tips for attracting birds without a garden? So what can we do without a garden?
If you have a balcony, you can still put out bird feeders. If you don't have a balcony at all, if you're allowed to do this, you could. I've seen this in my local area. People have fixed poles to the outside of their windows, and they've hung lots of bird feeders there. So maybe you could do that. And also, you could you could put nest boxes on the side of your building if that's allowed, and hopefully that will encourage some nesting songbirds.
Fingers crossed. Good luck with that, Christy. We hope you get some birds soon. Just having a quick look at the live camera. That's Belfast Wow. That's the visitor centre there. Can't see anything on the feeders at the moment. Can you?
No, I can't see, Jamie.
No. We've been flicking around the feeders, and there's certainly a lot of activity going on some of these. Some of these birds are pretty hungry. So we talked a little bit about attracting birds to your garden. Now, Bridget Strawbridge Howard is a naturalist and an author. She wrote the book Dancing with Bees, and she dedicates her whole garden to wildlife. And we've got some lovely tips from her here and a little bit of a tour of her garden.
When you are gardening with wildlife in mind, it really helps if you can multitask certain areas. And you can do this so easily with your flower beds and your borders. So this is our perennial flower bed, and in the summer it's a riot of colour. We've got, it's so hard to remember at this time of year, but we've got Viper's bugloss, Echium, Echinacea, Teucrium, Scabious, wild marjoram, foxgloves, and this one here is wild bergamot, which is also known as bee balm. And the thing about this plant is apart from being, it's a brilliant plant for pollinators, and most of what we've done here we have done initially for pollinators, with pollinators in mind. So apart from being a magnet especially for bumblebees in the summer, in fact this whole area has also been incredibly popular this winter with the goldfinches. And we've had a couple of different flocks. There's one day we had, I think I counted between 10 and 11 goldfinches just in this flower bed, feeding on the seed heads. So because we have left these flowering plants to go to seed and then left them over winter, and we'll leave them here through till this coming spring, it means that as well as so they're a great place for hibernating insects, and also there are some insects that actually nest in the hollow stems of some of these plants. But all of this, what looks like a scruffy, untidy garden, is just fantastic for the wild birds when they come in from the fields. So we do put feeders up in our garden. You know, we've got sunflower seed feeders and a few nuts, and sort of suet balls and suet sticks, but yeah, this is where we get the majority of the finches, the little flocks of finches. And as well as the goldfinches, we had a pair of green finches this winter in early January, which was so exciting because I haven't seen green finches for quite some time. I've seen bullfinches here as well, and chaffinches down on the ground. And this is our pond. And for me, it's just the heart of the garden, or the heart of any garden, is to have a pond. And I wish we'd made it bigger. I think everybody who has ever dug a pond has said afterwards, if only we'd made it bigger. But it's big enough, it's great. And so the thing about the pond, the grass snakes use it, is that it's alive. And I can see just now, I can see some water snails, but later on in the year, and you know, when we get into spring and summer, there will be pond skaters, water boatmen, diving beetles. There were newts in it last year, so I hope they'll come back again this year. And of course, the other thing, as well as it providing habitat for all of the aquatic invertebrates, it's great as well for dragonflies and damselflies. So we've had, I don't know how many species, quite a few last year, including a dragonfly called a broad-bodied chaser. I think that's right. And the male broad-bodied chaser, he would come and perch on this old bit of hazel that's sticking out over the edge of the pond here. He's a beautiful kind of a pale silvery blue colour, and he'd perch there, and he'd hold his own against the sparrows and the robin that wanted to come and use the perch as well. So great for insects. And the other thing about ponds is that they're brilliant for birds. And I've just been watching a huge carrion crow taking a bath in here. And not only taking a bath, but this carrion crow, he brings large chunks of bread from the people who put bread out a few doors up, and he drops it inside the pond and soaks it so it's more easy to eat. I think he also takes some of the creatures that are living in the pond as well. But as well as using the pond for water to drink, birds love bathing in it, and this area over here is a little bit more secluded because it's closer to the hedge, and we get a lot of sparrows and robins and great tits and blue tits coming and bathing over here, and blackbirds too enjoy this pond.
There's some lovely ideas there from Bridget, and of course providing water is really, really important for birds and for the wildlife. I had to go out this morning with the kettle and I was defrosting the bird baths, but they do need it for drinking and for bathing to keep their feathers in tip-top condition through the winter. And I would say thank you very much, Simon Joshua, who's messaged us to say, can you please make sure you mention that, because it's really, really important. So thank you, Simon, for pointing that out. But yeah, feeding birds is important, so is providing water. And you know, Simon, I think, don't you, Kabir?
Good to see you here, Simon.
It's good when we spot someone that we know. Jane Port has a quick question for us as well, about when should we stop putting out food for birds. What do you think? I tend to feed them all year round.
Me too. I think at this time of year, where the Big Garden Birdwatch takes place, a lot of people buy a lot of food for the birds, but also that is the most important time of year. But depending on the species, because each species has a different diet, you would need to put out food, I think, just in case, all year round, throughout the spring and the summer and the autumn. I generally do that as well, just so it's tailored to each bird's diet and whenever they need it throughout the course of the year. So I think it's really important to keep your bird food all year round.
Absolutely, and you can vary the amount, of course. You will notice, particularly towards the end of summer, that you may get less fewer birds visiting your garden. So you can sort of cut back on food a little bit, but certainly when it's cold and frosty now, keep that food going. Now, as well as putting up bird feeders, and some people have been very, very creative making them, you can do other things in cities in particular to attract nature, can't you?
Yes, you can. You can put out, as I've said before, you can put out bird boxes and nest boxes. There are actually different nest boxes for different birds. So I'm a big fan of the Barbican Wildlife Garden, which is a brilliant residence garden in the City of London, and they've attracted lots of different bird species through a number of different nest boxes. So a house sparrow nest box is shaped in a certain way, and so is a swift nest box. And yeah, there's all sorts of different nest boxes, and a good material to use is woodcrete, because it's long lasting, and you can yeah, it's good for a lot of different species as well. But another thing you can do is plant wildflowers, because this attracts pollinators and eventually birds, and sometimes even bats if you're lucky in some city areas. So I think wildflowers, different types of bird food, and nest boxes, different types of nest boxes too.
Those are your top three.
Yes.
Top three bits. But going back to flowers, because you don't need a garden, do you? You can just have a balcony or a window box. I think we've got an example to show you here from some I think it's Jack Badams who's done a nice little window box of flowers, and you just need a few plants, some herbs, some thyme, some oregano, bit of catmints, those kind of things that will attract pollinators in.
I mean, I was growing wildflowers in the garden, and it was very interesting. I saw this certain grass growing up, and I thought, what's this? Is it some kind of pest? And I took it out of the ground. It's this huge clove of garlic. And I feel really proud that I've grown wild garlic in my garden. And my mum actually uses it in her cooking sometimes, and it tastes delicious.
Oh, I have a pot of wild garlic at the end of my garden as well, also known as ramsons, and it's got that beautiful kind of subtle flavour. Anyway, before we digress into culinary gardening, just going back to what you could actually do for wildlife. Wild garlic, of course, probably good for wildlife too. I bet there's a few flies that are attracted in by the smell of the flowers. We've had some lovely photos sent in of other things people are doing at the moment, watching wildlife and making things for wildlife, looking out their windows. And I like it particularly when people have a proper little setup for Big Garden Birdwatch, when people sort of paper over their windows and have a little slot. Oh, that's someone with their little chart there. Oh, that's excellent. And yeah, that's what I meant. So covering up the windows, so you have this little slot to look through, and that's quite fun. So people are really going for it this year. Oh, look at that, bit of bird food too. So it's great to get all these messages and photos coming in. So do keep sending them in to us on social media. It's really lovely to see.
Well, we hope you're enjoying your Big Garden Birdwatch today. And here's Mike Dilger with an important message.
Hi, I'm Mike Dilger, and I'll be doing the RSBP Big Garden Birdwatch. And after the hour, when I've identified all the birds coming into our garden, I'll be going online to rspb.org.uk/birdwatch and submitting all my results. That way, we're going to get all this lovely data collected.
Exactly. So remember to send in your results, whether you had flocks of all sorts of birds visiting or just a friendly robin. We'd love to know.
And you can do this at rspb.org.uk/birdwatch.
So thank you to all of our contributors, Mike Dilger, Deborah Mead and Simon Mayo from Scala Radio, and Bridget Strawbridge-Howard for that lovely tour of the garden. We hope you've enjoyed watching this little show that we've made this morning. If you don't already get our weekly Notes on Nature email with all our latest wildlife news, you can sign up at rspb.org.uk/keep-in-touch. Make sure you say yes to emails. Now, if you're on Facebook, this is goodbye for now. You can catch up with all the avian action at youtube.com/rspbvideo. Luke Samuel will be back along with Lizzie Daly at 1 o'clock to answer all your burning wildlife questions. So, Kabir, do you want to say goodbye?
Well, thank you for having me, Jamie. It's been a real pleasure. So goodbye from me, and yes, it's been wonderful.
And goodbye from me. Thank you all for watching.
Goodbye.